So I'd like to start by sharing with you the map board. What we have here is a representation of the northeastern part of the United States in roughly the first half of the 19th century. It's divided into hexes, as you can see. The hex sides are what's important here. We have two kinds of terrain. We have the brown hex sides. Those are mountain hex sides that, depending on the kind of technology you're operating, are going to cost more to cross over. And then you have river hex sides, which also have increased build costs when you're trying to cross over them. But the build costs for both of these are going to depend on the kind of technology that you have, and I'll share that with you in a little bit. We have two kinds of cities on here. We have the darker cities, and those are called major cities. They are always in the game as cards that you will try to fulfill their demand. So these dark cities are always going to be in play. They tend to be a little larger than the others. Each city has a kind of size rating on it. So here's Washington is 4, Baltimore is 5, Philadelphia is 6, New York City is 7, and that is this is the largest city in the game. There's only one of those. You also have these white cities. These are minor cities. They may or may not appear in the game as city cards that you will trying to be delivered to. And as you can see, what you're going to be doing is dropping your network segments to connect these cities and try to create a network that you can pick up and deliver goods in. And so as we see here in this game, we're not operating on the hex sides, we're crossing hex sides. So each one of these is a segment of network. And the technology that it represents is going to depend on where you are in your own technology hunt. So the basics here are just like a lot of other train or transportation oriented games. We're trying to build network segments to connect cities so that we can deliver goods and score points. Next comes the technology track. I will zero in on this here. And what this does is record your progress up the technology track. Each level here represents a level of technology. And the reason why this is important is that it determines how long a delivery you can make. So it's sort of like engine size in Railways of the World. Everyone starts out with Turnpike 1. That's the most rudimentary. That's the most rudimentary of these technology levels. We're Turnpike 1, and we're talking about gravel roads, dirt roads, maybe a little bit of macadamized roads. But really the first efforts for common carriers to produce these transportation networks that will make it easier for others to carry goods across their network. So we begin at Turnpike 1, and then we move up to the next level, which is 2, but there are two options for the second level. You can see here we've got Turnpike 2, which is imagine better roads, fully macadamized, maintained more effectively. Or we have Canal 2. And Canal 2 represents the first of the real canal networks that were built by private companies, usually joint stock enterprises, in the early 19th century. And so the presumption here is that these are both technologies that will let you make two-length deliveries, but the Canal 2 is the sort of the better, more progressive, more forward-looking version of this two-level technology. And so while both will help you deliver to 2, there are differences in the way they operate. Canal 2 is worth more. If you were to end your game here, this would be worth 4 dividends or victory points, whereas Turnpike 2 only gives you 2 dividends or victory points if you end the game there. Canal 2 will also, in addition to give you more victory points, it will give you a +1 DRM on 1 die per invent action if trying for the next level tech. So if you have achieved Canal 2 and you're going for a 3-level tech, you'll get a +1 DRM when you try to invent. So Canal 2 is better than Turnpike 2, so why would you ever want to go for Turnpike 2 instead of Canal 2? Well, you might want to do that because it's easier to get Turnpike 2 than it is Canal 2. And so what these dice represent are the successes required on die rolls that you'll need in order to achieve that tech. And so you can see here, Turnpike 2 requires a total of 2 5s. So you're going to be rolling a bunch of dice on your invent action, and you're going to need 2 successes, and a success is just a 5 or 6 on a die roll. Canal 2 is harder to get. You need 6s in order to succeed on that. And as you can see, as the technology improves and gets better, more dice are required. Things change a little bit. So there's two level technologies, there's 2 3-level technologies, then you only have 4-level technology, only one of those, the railroad. Railroad is also 5. And then you get to airship, which is the highest level of technology. You can make 6-length deliveries if you get up there. It's pretty hard to get. You need 6 6s. But it lets you ignore terrain costs. So each of these technologies also has a terrain effect. So for example, if you're working with canals, and we go back over to the map, if your current technology is canal technology, you wouldn't have to pay any additional money to build a canal across a waterway, right? So there's no waterway penalty on canal building. If you had a railroad, though, this would be +2 to cross. So, and here's this little, see, I won't spend a lot of time on this, but you can see that there's different building cost additions depending on the technology level that you are currently employing. As you can see over here, within each level, you've got these ranks. So the first person to get there is going to occupy the 1 space, second, third, fourth, fifth. And this is essentially determining tech order. So right now, the tech order is, you read it from bottom right to top left. So it's green, blue, red, and yellow. And that is actually going to be reflected at the beginning of, at the end of each round. We're going to update player turn order to reflect that. There is an action that lets you try to achieve these successes. So we can see here that yellow has 2 innovators. This means that on previous invent actions, they have been able to roll 2 6s so far. So you can see that you don't need to, you can start working on a technology, but you don't need to complete it that turn. In fact, you often can't. You might have to take several turns in order to complete a technology upgrade. And the way you are going to try to achieve these successes is you're going to pay for dice. And the cost of these dice are different for each technology level. But just for example, for Railroad 5, 1 dice will cost you 4, 2 will cost you 5, 3, 6, 4, 7, 5, 8. 6 dice will cost you 10, 7 dice will cost you 13. And so these are the maximums number of dice that you'll be able to roll on each one. So it gets harder and more expensive as you go along and try to build that better tech. But you're also building a better engine, a sort of game engine to help you get that. So that's the technology board. Technological development is mainly going to determine how far you can deliver goods. And that's important because the way the victory points work here is you earn dividends for making long deliveries that retire or fulfill the demand of big cities. So just by way of example here, if yellow were able to complete Detroit to Buffalo, so we have 2 goods waiting there. These are both goods that Buffalo needs. Buffalo is a 4-size city. We go up to the map and see how yellow is doing. And to deliver from Detroit to Buffalo is 1, 2, 3, 4 links. So the math is super simple. We're just going to take a 4-length delivery that closes out a 4-size city, and we multiply those two. So that would be 16 dividends or victory points for yellow. So that's how that works. That is why your delivery length is important and why you want it to be as high as possible. Next thing I want to share with you is the Arts and Industries board. So this is essentially a kind of bonus and rule breaker board. It begins here in the Lyceum. All these figures, these meeples, are your innovators. They are the inventors, developers, designers, technicians, mechanics, artisans, all the people who are trying to help you grow your technology so that you can improve your network and make bigger, longer deliveries. And so the central space, when you put an innovator in here, and that's something you do on an Arts and Industries action, he'll come into the Lyceum. Here's an overflow for the Lyceum because there's not a whole lot on there. And from there, on an Arts and Industries action, they'll be able to move into these adjacent spaces. And this is basically kind of a hex map. And the adjacent spaces are all going to do things. When you move an innovator onto a space during an Arts and Industries action, you're going to be able to take this extra action. So the Arts and Industries board is really about expanding opportunity, being able to take more actions over the course of the game, and that's going to improve your pace and help you win. Additionally, each one of these actions has a special bonus associated with it. So you might be able to build track without worrying about the cost of the terrain under it. You might be able to deliver a good without worrying about the expense of that. Or you might be able to take an invent action with a special bonus die roll that makes it easier to get a success. So this is a way of leveraging your actions. And the basic way this works, when this board is activated, let's do it with red. You're going to be able to move each of your guys in turn. But it's pretty expensive to move in here. And so the movement formula is pretty easy. We're going to move. Here's the red innovator we want to move. He's the first one we want to move, so that's going to cost 1. If we had moved him and now we're moving a second, it would just cost 2 just to begin moving. So it's 1 to begin moving. The first space he moves to is going to cost 1. If he moves to a second space, it's going to cost an additional 2. A third space will cost an additional 3. Additionally, you're going to pay, when you move into a space, you have to pay for any opponent's innovators who are in there as well. So if we were going to move this red innovator to this is an endgame scoring space. So that's these corners here are endgame scores that will give you bonus points at the end of the game if you have them occupied. So let's say we're going to move this guy. Now let's say that this guy had already done a build action. I put him down here to show that he's been exhausted. So we've already done that. So this is our second guy we're moving in this Arts and Industries phase. So it's going to be $2 to move him, $3 to move him to that space, plus 1 for that opponent. So that's $4 to move there. $5, $6 because that's the second space he's moved to. $7, $8, $9 to move to this space because that's the third space he's moved to. $10, $11, $12 because he's got to pay for each one of those innovators that are in that space. So there are going to be points in the game where you're going to have a chunk of money and that will let you move these guys around. Oh, and then when he gets here, let's say instead of going there, he went to here. So he goes to this space. This lets you take a deliver or a contract action. When he's doing the action, we put him there. When he's finished with the action, we're going to retire him. We're going to exhaust him and put him down so that we remember how many of these fellows we've moved on our turn. And then at the end of the turn, we're going to unexhaust all of our innovators so they'll be ready to use next turn. So that's basically how arts and industries work. You're going to be trying to get extra actions in there, and this particularly becomes important as the game moves into its final stages, when you're trying to race somebody to the end, or you're trying to really extract as many actions as possible. And this is going to happen whenever you take an arts and industries action. I'll go over the action phases in just a little bit. Next, I want to show you the goods market. This is the mechanism for actually getting the cubes you will need to put onto your city cards, and then you're going to be moving those cubes around in order to deliver them. I'll show you how that works in just a little bit. But the way this works is we have six markets. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Each of these markets has two bins in it, a left bin and a right bin. Each has a value associated with it. So selling to this bin would give you $4. Buying from this bin would cost $4. $2 on this one. So that's pretty straightforward. Each of these markets can hold a maximum of 3 goods. So this market is full. That one's not, that one's not, that one's not, that one's not, that one's not. This is the only one that's full. No goods can be sold to this market, either bin, because it's full and can't take any more than its maximum of 3. But so each of these markets has a kind of equilibrium. It can be in different states. It can be equal, in which case there's one good on each side. If it was like that, it would also be equal. Or it can have one side dominant because it has a majority. So on this one, the $3 bin is dominant. On this one, the $5 bin is dominant. The $6 bin is dominant. The $3 bin is dominant here. And the reason, and what I'm doing is tilting these cards toward the side that is dominant. It's just a little visual player aid that is helpful for me. How this is oriented is going to tell you what you can do with it. So on the dominant side, this is basically telling you you can only get out of the market. You can't put anything into this bin. You can only take out. This side, you can't take anything out. That's what that means, but you can take something in. So you can always buy from a dominant market, but you always sell to the non-dominant market. So if I was putting a good back in here, let's say I was doing this bin, I'm going to sell my wood there. That's going to give me $5, and it will immediately change the equilibrium. And all these spaces in the bin are functionally equivalent. They're just to help show, I put them up here to show the dominant, here to show the non-dominant. So in this instance, they're equal, so I have a equal bin. And when this is the case, I can sell or buy from this bin, sell or buy from this bin. So I'd want to be buying from the cheaper $3 bin if I could, and selling to the more expensive $5 bin if I could. And every time you do one of these actions that interacts with the market, you're going to change this sort of on the fly. So if you're doing 2 deliveries or multiple deliveries on your turn, this can change. And it just gives you something to manipulate and to try to strategize about. So that's the basic market mechanism that goes into this game. Next thing I'd like to show you are these city cards. So you're going to have 1, 2, or 3 city cards in play. Actually, in the first portion of the game, you must have 2 or 3 city cards in play all the time. You also have a hand of city cards. So these would be waiting on deck. Your hand maximum is 2. But you don't have to have cards in your hand if you don't want to. And what we see on the city cards is we get the name of a city. So here's Detroit. That has a matching city up here on the board. You have Buffalo is over here. That's the other card that is in play here. What I'm trying to do on these city cards is to fill their demands. The greater the value of the city, the more challenging it is to fulfill that demand. But that's my goal. So I want to move these goods from Detroit over here to Buffalo. I can do that. In this case, I'm yellow. My technology level is at 3. I'm going from Detroit to Buffalo, 1, 2, 3, 4. So I won't be able to do that right now because my tech level isn't sufficient. In this instance, yellow is trying madly to go for tech 4. Let's assume for a minute that that succeeded and they were able to do that. Now what we would be doing are 2 delivery actions. That's the action that lets you move this cube from here to here and this one from here to here. And I'll go over those actions in a little bit. I just kind of want to outline basically what's going on with these city cards. We have an array of city cards up there at the top. So you're going to have chances to change the contracts that you are trying to fulfill for these different cities. You basically want to shape your game so that you can most efficiently create the best network that you can manage. So that's the city card angle. The city cards is what you use to keep track of the goods that you are trying to move around. And when you complete a card, so if we were able to do this, we'd put these over here, we would return them to market and collect their value depending on where we put them in the market. We'd replace them. These are just generic tokens. These are filled tokens. They just show that that bin has been filled, that bin has been filled, that bin has been filled. So you can see on these cards, you've got supply bins and then demand bins. And so we're trying to move from supply bins on one card to demand bins on another card. If we are able to do this, then at the end of the action phase we're in, we're going to be able to retire this card. And there's a little procedure that we do for that. You can see it in the playthrough. But basically, this is where we score it, and we're going to get a few bonus actions, including a chance to put an additional guy into arts and industries. So basically what happens is we get a free arts and industries action, and we're able to put an innovator, one of our 8 meeples, into arts and industries for free. You can, so this is the bonus that you get when you retire a card. You'll also be able to get a new card from up in the array if you want, or so you want to be retiring these cards because that gives you dividends or victory points and gives you some bonus actions as well. That is what the card play is about in this game. So this is the goods market. It's where you will get the cubes that you will be moving around. You have these different colored cubes, stand for different things. This natural color is food and food products, cereal grains, things like that. Gray are metals, finished parts, machine parts, nails, things like that. Black is coal and quarried rock, ore, things like that. White is cotton and plantation goods. Purple, the finished goods, is over here, and this is wood and wood products over here. That's what the brown is. So that's what all these goods are representing. And the reason why they are important is that different cities have different. So this is the Boston card. Different cities have different demands for various goods. So here is a example of some city cards in action. You'll notice that the way this works is you have the name of the city, its value, so the city size, and you have some supply bins. So 3 supply bins on each card. They might not all be able to carry goods. And then these tell you what kinds of goods you can actually bring into there. So this bin will take a metal good or a finished goods, because that's what Boston is pretty good at producing right now. That's a finished good. Question mark, and these only come with the bigger cities, means that it's connected to international markets, broader markets, and so it can bring in a range of different kinds of goods. So you'll see here with New York City, it's the biggest city. It's very flexible in terms of what you can put in there, but it's also quite difficult to actually close out. So that's the city card anatomy. The other thing you'll see is this pointer is telling you whether the city card is an Eastern card or a Western card, like Chicago. This is important because what you want to be doing, or one of the ways you can score points in this game, is to connect eastern and western cities. So here the blue player has Baltimore nailed down. That's an eastern city. There'd be a little right-hand pointer on that one. And if they could connect to Cleveland up here, it would only take one more segment. They would have one of these east-west connections. So Baltimore to Cleveland, the Baltimore is worth 5, Cleveland is worth 4, and that would give you 5 plus 4 extra dividends during your end game. So making the east-west link is something you want to do as well. In this game that we just completed, no player was able to accomplish that. So let me speak also to the kind of kit that you're going to be working with. You're going to have these cards when they're out here and face up. They are active. They are in play. They can also be in your hand here as well. These are collected dividends. I'm using Monopoly money here. This is always a little bit confusing, but I didn't have time to print out the special dividend notes for this test. But you can't lose these. These are victory points. Unless players choose to play secret victory points, you play them face up and open information. You also have operating capital. This is your money that you're using. So $1 and $5 chips. Of course, you can use poker chips or whatever you like. So this is the kind of in-game money that you are going to be using to buy goods, move goods. Lots of things require these chips, and you're going to be using them pretty frequently. There's a bank, of course, for the rest of those. That bank is unlimited. It's not like an 18xx game. You have your network segments, which, of course, you can see are what you're using to represent your connections across the track. And you have these are game limited. In a 4-player game, you have a max of 15, so you can't just go crazy and build whatever you want, or you will not be able to make the connections that you want. And then you have these meeples, and these meeples are your innovators. These are going to be used on the tech track to help you make longer runs by developing better technology, and they're going to be useful on the arts and industries board, where they can be used to gain you bonus actions and end game scoring points. So that's pretty much the kit that you are going to be working with. You're also going to be rolling a fair number of dice, usually on invent actions and getting money actions. The next thing I want to show you are the actual actions. So how does your turn actually work? Well, we have our player order on the board. So right now this is set as green goes first, then blue, red, yellow. At the end of each round, this is reset to follow tech order. So tech order is green, yellow, red, blue, red in this instance. So it would have to be reset at the end of this. So these are your guys, and you have 3 action phases that you can activate, and then you're done, right? So you're going to do 3 action phases, and then you're done. Thing is, though, each action phase is, you have a potential for doing more than one action or procedure within each action phase. So here is, this is a board that I use to, it's not necessary, but it's basically a player aid. And I use this to keep track of and remember the actions and the procedures that go with them. And so what's going to happen on your turn is there are 7 possible action phases here. Back a little bit. I'll see also if I can get a graphic of this up on the screen. It might be easier. And so there's 7 action phases, and they're in sequence, right? So first is deliver, and it says 2 times max. Then you have build, number 2 is 1 times max. Number 3 is contract, and that's 2 times max. So deliver is pretty obvious. It's what you're going to use to move goods from supply on one card to try to fill the demand on another card. Build is you're building your network segments. Contract is how you get goods onto supply in your city cards from the market. Number 4 is a city card action phase, which you can activate once, and that's going to basically let you manipulate your city card so that you can try to get a favorable draw. The invent action is what you're going to use to try to increase your technology. Arts and Industries is the procedure you invoke to move your guys in Arts and Industries. And then 7th is the stock market action, and then you can do this up to 3 times. You can spend up to 3 action phases doing that, and that's one of the ways that you're going to be making money in the game. So what happens on your turn is you can activate 3 of these phases. You can reactivate some phases. So the deliver you can do twice. You can do so 2 of your 3 action phases can be consumed by deliver actions. You can contract twice, and stock market will let you use all 3. So for example, you might build, contract, or you might deliver, invent, and then do an Arts and Industries. So you can activate only 3 of these, and you must do them in sequence. So you can't contract before you build. You can't deliver after you've contracted. You have to do them in this sequence. Within this, though, there are possibilities for taking multiple actions. So that's why I call these action phases. You are activating phases. For example, at the end of the delivery action phase, we check to see if any of our cities have all their demand bins filled. And if we do that, then we go into the retirement procedure, which closes out that city and brings a new one in, and it gives you a guy in Arts and Industries. So the retirement procedure is one that effectively lets you do some special things, and then it also lets you take a city card action and an Arts and Industries action, right? So it's possible within a phase to get extra actions or procedures out of it. But you can only activate 3 phases. Stock market is one where you can activate 1, 2, or 3 phases that you haven't used yet, and I'll go over that action in a minute. It's basically how you get more money. So let me try to quickly go over these actions and give you a sense of what you do. The first action in our sequence is the deliver action, and this is the way you move goods from supply to other cities. And what you're going to do in this action is move 1 goods cube from a supply bin in a city in your network. So it's got both of these cities have to be in the same network that is connected by your network segments. And you're going to move this into a supply bin or a demand bin into a city in the same network. And you have to go into like bin. So here's a white cube, could go in there because it's got that listed in the demand bin, and the brown could go over there. And so what you're going to do, the cost for doing this is 1 per link. Each link may be passed through only once, so you can't keep going through the same city to make a longer delivery. That trace city path has to be in your network, and the links may not exceed your tech level. So in the yellow instance, what we are trying to do is go from Detroit to Buffalo, that is 4 links away. 1, 2, 3, 4. This is all in my yellow network. I have a tech level of 4 over here in my tech thing, and so I can make this delivery. And so what I would do in this instance is I would invoke the delivery action phase twice, once for each of those 2 goods that I am trying to move. So I would move him over here, and that's going to give me $4. I'm sorry, it's going to cost me $4 because that delivery is 4 links long. And then what I do is I replace this good with a filled token. That's going to denote that that bin has been filled. Then I'm going to sell this good back to the market. I have to put it in a bin that is not dominant, so one that's equal or non-dominant. This looks like a pretty good one. This is a $4 bin, right? I can put in either one of these. I'll obviously put in the $4 side, collect $4, and then that's going to change the balance of the market immediately so that the $4 side becomes dominant. Whoops, I'm sorry for moving this around. And that's how a delivery works. It is possible for me to deliver to another card's demand bin. So actually this couldn't work here. So it's like that. There's no white. So I could, it's conceivable that I could send this good over to Buffalo's supply bin. I might need to do that if I'm trying to link to something longer and I don't have the tech level to get there. It's a possibility, although it's a kind of inefficient thing. And then at the end of this phase, so I'm going to do that delivery action. Let's say I did a second delivery action, so I'm going to have that action phase activated twice. I'm going to put that there. Now this card is full. And at the end of that deliver action phase, after I've taken my 1 or 2 deliver actions, I then check to see if any of my cards have full demand bins. Buffalo does. That's going to let me retire that card. The retirement procedures that we're going to follow at the end of this is you'll see this coming up over and over throughout the game. You want to do this as much as possible. What you're going to do is collect victory points. Well, first thing you're going to do is take off anything in supply, and you're going to have to return it to the market for no value. You won't be able to get any money out of it. So you don't want to keep things hanging around in supply, or you'll waste some efficiencies. You're going to, each one of these is going to give you a delivery bonus of $1. That's the next thing that's going to happen. So I take these off and I collect 3 extra bucks. I'm going to gain the victory points for this. It was a 4-link delivery to a 4-size city. That's going to give me $16 in Monopoly money, which is my dividends for this demo. I'm going to flip this card and save it for endgame scoring. I want to remember how many cards I've retired because there's possible victory points at the end of the game for doing that. Now I'm going to get a city card action, which I will show you later, but basically a city card action is going to let me interact with the city card array up top, as well as interact with the cards in my hand. It's basically going to let me get another card and play it if I choose to do that. It's a may. So that's my city card action. And then the last thing I do in my retirement procedure, and the best, is I get to put one of my innovators up there in Arts and Industries and take an Arts and Industries action, which means I can move as many of my innovators as I wish and have the money to move. These innovators are game limited at 8. On my turn, I can bring them home whenever I want, as long as they're not exhausted. So if I've moved somebody in Arts and Industries and gotten their action benefit, they would be laid down on their side, and I would not be able to recall them. Let's say he had just done that. But if I needed an innovator somewhere else, I'd be able to pull him home. Now, where else would I need it? Well, I might need it over on the tech board, because I'm working on a big technology. So I've got all these guys over here. I'm working on this next tech, and I've got so many guys in Arts and Industries that I can't get any more successes over here because I don't have any innovators left over. I've used them all up. Well, I can bring them home from Arts and Industries. It's also possible to do the opposite. If I was working on this and decided it's much more important that I have this guy back home so that I can put him into A&I after I retire a card, I can do that too. So they're like barrels in vino. So I can bring them home on my turn whenever I want. The only thing is that it can't be exhausted. It can't have already done something that turn. So that is the deliver action. It's one of the most important and complicated things that you will be doing in this game. So don't be intimidated if that seems like a lot right now. Next option is the build action, and what this lets me do is build segments of my transportation network. What I do is I connect 2 cities with 1 to 3 uninterrupted network segments, so I can't build longer than 3 segments. There's a rule breaker for that in Arts and Industries. And I'm going to connect from hex center to hex center across hex sides. Each hex side accepts 1 segment, which means that if I'm up here and somebody is got something I want. So here's an example of this. It would have been great if red had been able to do that, but they couldn't because each hex side accepts only 1 network segment, so they had to build like that. But guess what? There's a rule breaker for that in Arts and Industries as well. Back down to my action description. And I can only build if that track segment is connected somehow at some point to an active city card that I have, right? So I can't just go off into the wild blue yonder and build wherever I want to mess somebody up. I have to be continuing a network connected to an active city card. The costs are, there's $1 just for the action. So it's a kind of opportunity cost of simply taking the action. Then it's $1 per network segment. And then there is a terrain cost possibly. For red to build these 2 segments, they look like that. It would cost $1 for the action, $1 for this network segment. Plus, then we'd have to check and see if, so we're up to $2. Now we have to see if there's a cost here. Right now, red is at Canal 3, and Canal, there's no extra cost for crossing riverways with canals. So, so we've got 2 so far. And then the last segment would be 3. Additionally, if you are starting a non-contiguous network, which will of course be the case at the beginning of the game, if you decide that Chicago to Terre Haute is really important, this is non-contiguous with something that you built, so that's a +1 as well. So this one would be 1 to build, 2 for that segment, 3 for that segment, +1, 4 for the non-contiguous. And so the first build of the game will obviously be non-contiguous because you don't have anything there, so your first build will cost you an extra $1. That is the build action, pretty straightforward. The next action is the contract action, and this is how you get goods into supply. You can activate this phase twice if you wish. What you do, as it says here, is you designate the good type in the city. You're going to pay the market value of the good to the bank, and you're going to place the good from the market to the supply bin on your city card. So let's see if we have an example here. Blue has New York and Boston. And let's say if they wanted to add another good to New York City so they could eventually deliver it to Boston, or maybe they want to put something in Boston that they can deliver to New York City, they're going to go over to the goods market, find that good, pay its value, and just drop the good on its bin. It has to match the bin. It's got to be a like bin. So only purple there, purple or gray there. It is possible if you really needed something not purple there, if you needed a white one like crazy, you could pay double its value in the market and then drop it there. So you can break that rule, but it can be quite expensive. The question mark is only on larger cities, and that means it will accept any good in that bin. So it's very flexible because these are on bigger cities because they have these links to international markets and ports and whatnot, and they can get a wider range of goods. You can't put this cube down unless it is conceivable for you to deliver it. So here's an example with yellow. They've got Chicago and Detroit. If we go up to the map, though, we realize that Chicago and Detroit are not connected. So I could not put anything in Chicago right now because it can't deliver to anywhere. This rule is not length dependent. So as long as you could conceivably deliver it somewhere, regardless of length, you're okay. It doesn't have to match your tech level or be below your tech level. It just means that at some point in the future, you have to theoretically be able to make that link. So there's that requirement. And that is the contract action. The next action, number 4 in the sequence, is the city card action, which you can activate one time, and this will let you manage your city cards. Essentially what happens here is you have 2 kinds of card interactions that you can make, and you can do them in your choice of order. The first part of it, or one of these things that you can do, is interact with the city card array up here. So there's always, well, not always, but there are 6 slots for cards, I should say. If these are taken, they get restocked at the end of a round, not the end of a player turn. And so what this lets you do is you can buy a city card from the array and put it into your hand. You can swap a city card from the array. To buy it, you have to pay the value. If you swap it, you do the difference of the value. So if you give up an expensive city in your hand like New York for a small city like Terre Haute, you actually can make some money by doing this. So you're going to interact with the array. You can put that card in your hand. Your hand can be over 2 cards in the middle of your turn, but by the end of the turn it has to be down to 2. And then the other thing you can do is interact between your hand and the table. So you could swap a card from hand to table. If you do that, you lose any goods that are on supply. They would have to go back to the market for no value. Or you could just place a new card, assuming that you don't exceed your active city card max of 3. There is a rule breaker in arts and industries for that. And you can do those in either turn. So essentially this is the way you are going to be getting new city cards into your hand and creating the possibility of making these deliveries. It's an important part of the game you want to pay pretty close attention to. Particularly, this tends to happen in the beginning of the game when you're trying to get your network settled and jockey for position to figure out what you actually want to do and where you want to go. This is also a procedure that is invoked when you retire a card. So this is the next to last thing you do in the retirement procedure. So you get a freebie here if you retire a card. You get to put in a new card. And just to reinforce that you must end a turn with a maximum hand limit of 2 and maximum city card limit of 3. You also have to keep 2 or 3 city cards active until the first game end trigger. And that game end trigger is a card at the bottom of the city deck that says New Year. And so the first time this deck goes through, as soon as that card is exposed, the rules change a little bit. It becomes possible to end the game, and you no longer have to maintain that 2 city card minimum. In fact, if you end your turn with 0 or 1 city active, you have triggered the actual game end. And what happens then is every other player gets 1 turn. You ignore any end of round procedure, and you total up the final scores. The next action to share with you is number 5, the invent action. And this is the action that's going to let you increase your, or try anyway, to increase your technology level. And what you're going to do is you're going to look and see where you are on the tech board. So let's say yellow, which is at Railroad 4 right now, is interested in getting to Railroad 5 so they can make a 5-link delivery. They've already begun to develop this tech on previous turns. They've had 3 successes so far, which they've recorded with their innovators. And so now they need two. So these numbers here are the numbers that you have to be able to roll on a D6 in order to create a success. And would put an innovator there. Once you've got all these successes, so it takes 5 for Railroad 5, you achieve that tech, your innovators will go home, and you will move your control token to show where you are on the track. So what you do to do this is you can see there are costs for the maximum number of dice here. So on Railroad 5, one die costs $4. To roll 2 dice costs $5. To roll 3 dice is 6, 7, 8, 10, 13. So there's a kind of increasing cost. The more dice you get, then you're going to roll. So you're going to pay. And now let's say we wanted to roll 4 dice. What I'm trying to do with 4 dice is to roll 2 6s. That's what I need to finish this here. I'll take any 6s, right? If I get 1, that's great. I just won't have completed that tech. And so what I bought 4 dice. I paid for that, and now I'm going to roll. One thing I want to be doing is thinking about what my die roll modifiers are, and there's 2 sources of die roll modifiers. One is on the tech itself. If you've got the better of the 2-level technology or the 3-level technology, you'll get a +1 DRM on the next level of tech. Yellow wouldn't enjoy that here because there's no option for Railroad 4. But on Turnpike 2 or Canal 2, Turnpike 2 gives you no +1 DRM, but Canal 2 gives you a +1 DRM if you're going through either 3-level tech. Railroad 3 gives you a +1 DRM if you're going for Railroad 4. Yellow's already at Railroad 4. They're going for Railroad 5. There's no +1 DRM there. But then if we swing over to Arts and Industries, we can get some more +1s here. For each one of the innovators, of our innovators in the Lyceum, so there's 1, 2, 3, because this is overflow for the Lyceum. Each one of these is a +1 DRM, and I can apply those DRMs as I want to any of the dice that I roll. So I can put them all on one die if that's most helpful, etc. The only time I can't do that is when there's a bonus space for a +2 DRM here. I can't break up that +2 into 2 +1s. I have to use it as a +2. But in every other instance, you can use these cumulatively however you want. So I have my 4 dice. I'm looking for 2 6s. I have 3 +1 DRMs, and that's going to give me 1, 2, and I won't be able to make the other one. So I'll get, that does give me 2 successes. That's all I need. I note here that yellow has no more innovators though, and even though I've completed that tech, I still need 2 innovators to finish that off. So I'm going to have to invoke this rule. I can bring home any unexhausted innovators, that is, guys who haven't moved. This guy is moving right here, so he can't come home. And so maybe I'll take him home and him home. That will let me put that over on that. And I have succeeded in gaining that level of tech, so all these guys immediately come home, and that guy will go there. So that's how the invent action works to help you improve your tech. Arts and Industries action is the 6th on the sequence, and this is going to let you take these bonus actions. If you take this during your normal sort of action phase, it will let you spend $5 to put an innovator here. So green could pay $5 to add an innovator into the Lyceum. And then every green innovator would have the option to move. You're going to resolve each one of these movements case by case by case. So you're going to choose an innovator, you're going to move him, you're going to designate the place where you want him to go, you're going to trace the path, and then you're going to pay for it. And I think I've went over how this worked a little bit earlier, but let's say we wanted to get this green guy over to this space because we want to take this bonus city action. The cost would be, he's the first one that I'm, of my innovators that I'm moving, so that's 1. This space is going to cost 1 to get to, so the second space will cost 2, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4. Plus I have to pay for every opponent innovator I walk through or pass, so it's going to be 5 to get this guy out here. Then he will be able to take this bonus action. So it's a normal action, but there's usually a power associated with it. You might not be able to use it, but these can come in handy as sort of rule breakers. When you're done with that action, you resolve it fully, then you're going to exhaust him, which means that he can't move anymore, and will help you keep track of how many guys you've already moved. And then if you want, you can move another innovator. Your second innovator is going to cost 2 simply to activate. Your third would cost 3. All the movement costs are the same. You cannot share a space with your own colored innovator, so you might have to move things around to avoid them from bumping into each other. You can't retrace your path, fairly standard. The Lyceum works like this, so I can always, if I'm in an adjacent space, it's always free for me to move to the Lyceum, and then I would exhaust. So I'm still recording the number of innovators who have moved, so if I moved a third innovator, it would still cost me 3 to even begin activating, even though this guy didn't pay anything for being number 2. You can always move to the Lyceum and exhaust if you're in an adjacent space. Let's see, and the Lyceum itself gives you 2 kinds of bonuses, so you don't necessarily want to move everything all over. Sometimes you want to leave guys in the Lyceum. They give you 2 kinds of bonuses. They give you a +1 DRM for each innovator who's here, and that it doesn't matter whether he's exhausted or non-exhausted. The other thing it does is it gives you a +$1 on a stock market action, which I'll explain shortly, but that only works if he's not exhausted. So I would have a +$1 +2 plus my second dollar. I would get no $+ on my stock market action for him because he's exhausted. He's already moved. That is the basis of arts and industries. These are mostly regular actions that have bonuses associated with them. The corner spaces are end game victory points for different things. So you have your Cash Tycoon. This gives you 1 dividend for each $5 you've accumulated. Network Tycoon is 1 dividend per city in your target network, in your largest network. This one gives you points for retired city cards. This one for network segments, 1 dividend for each 2 network segments. So these are things you want to be moving to in the end. When you move them here, you can move them out again if you want. They're not stuck there, but you're generally going to be thinking about trying to get them over there in the end game. And yeah, just a reminder that taking an arts and industry action with a free innovator is the last part of the retirement procedure for a city card that has been fulfilled. The last action in our phases is the stock market action, and this is a way of getting money. And how this works is you take the number of action phases unspent. So if you've taken 1 build action and then you've saved your other 2 action phases, you can burn them both here. So you can invoke this 1, 2, or 3 times depending on the number of action phases you wish to expend on that. And this will give you money. And for each one of these, you have an option. So this is the formula for 1 action phase spent on this, 2 action phases, or 3. Sometimes when you get broke, you just spend a whole turn doing nothing but collecting money. And you always have an option here. The left-hand option is the secured guaranteed bonus. So if you really want to make sure that you get this cash and there's no question about what's coming in, then you can just use the guaranteed plan. Or you can sort of play the stock market and introduce a random element into this. So if you are spending 1 action phase, you roll 1 die and you get that result plus $2. If you're spending 2 action phases, you roll 2 dice plus $3. 3 action phases would be 3 dice plus $4. And then, so that's a way to get some money. When I take this action, so this is something I explained, just a good place to make sure I clarify it. When you take this action, you're also going to get plus $1 for each unexhausted innovator in the Lyceum. So green, for example, has unexhausted, unexhausted, exhausted. So on their stock market phase, and they would do this whether they're rolling or getting the guaranteed income, whatever it's going to be is plus $2, one for each of those guys. So that is the stock market action, pretty straightforward. There's just 2 more things I want to explain about the turn and the rounds. So you're going to complete your player turn. Then you have to do a little bit of maintenance. If you have tokens here on supply bins, you're going to have to maintain those. You're going to have to spend $1 for each of those that are in supply. So you really don't want to be keeping things sitting there on your cards for a long time. It can get rather expensive. Next thing you're going to do is restore all of your exhausted innovators and arts and industries. You're going to make sure these guys all pop up. So what this means is that there are multiple times that you can conceivably invoke arts and industries on your turn. You could deliver something that retires a card, that gives you an arts and industries action. You could then take an arts and industries action, which would let you activate it all over again. The way this works is that whenever you do this on your turn, you're exhausting a guy. Oh, he's moved. It doesn't matter when you do it, you're just exhausting them. And that is, of course, as we've said, going to jack up the costs of moving them further and record that they can't move again. So each guy can move once per player turn, not per arts and industries phase. So at the end of your turn, you're going to restore all these guys just to remind yourself that you can use them again next turn. But you do that at the end of your player turn, not at the end of a particular phase. Third thing you're going to do is return to bank any money in excess of $25. Doesn't happen too often, but it's certainly possible. You have a huge windfall. You've saved some money from last turn, and then you spent all 3 action phases making more money in the stock market, and you wind up with $28. Well, you can have that $28 in the middle of your turn, but at the end of your turn, anything over 25 is going to return to the bank. So it's an anti-hoarding rule. And then the fourth and final thing you're going to do at the end of your turn is you're going to check for the second endgame trigger. So if the New Year's card has already showed up, which means that the first year is over and the game, it's possible for the game to end, then we check for the next thing, and that next thing is having 0 or 1 active city cards. So yellow has 2, that's not going to do it, but green is down to 1 card. Let's say they were the first player to do that. Green is basically out, and then each other player would have 1 turn. If this breaks up over a round, you just ignore the end of round procedure, and then the game would be over and you would total up your final scoring. So that's what happens at the end of your player turn, those 4 little steps. There's also an end of round procedure. What you're going to do is update the current turn order as tech order. So this is moved around. So now yellow is in the lead, and then it's going to look like this. So we're going to update that. Second thing we do is we're going to remove the rightmost stack. Now, the reason why I say stack is that with the gray cards, there's multiples, and if multiples ever appear, you just place them on top of each other. So it's possible to have like 3 New York cards over here. The whole stack gets discarded. We slide everything down, and we restock from left to right into the array. Chicago would get stacked like that, and we would keep drawing from the city card deck. And so that's a kind of internal game clock. Basically, you can't play more than two sort of game years. And so that is the third and final thing you do at the end of round. You check to see if that New Year's card is exposed. The first time it's exposed is we move into this phase where you can now end a player turn with 0 or 1 active cities. The second time it comes up, that's it. You have ended the game. That gives us enough to get playing, so I think the next thing I want to do is to do a kind of playthrough of the game with you.